Welcome to the Story Nerd Podcast, Hook Your Reader episode. This is where we give authors our professional advice about their query letters and first 10 pages writing samples. My name is Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
And I am Kathleen Fox. I'm a literary agent with the Rights Factory and a freelance professional editor at Fox Editorial.
On today's episode, we're reviewing a love story from Tanya Dawes. Now, it takes a lot of guts for writers to send in their work and have it reviewed publicly, but it shows that they're willing to step out and bet on themselves, and we are happy to help. So, Tanya, thank you so much for sharing and for giving us all an opportunity to learn. Before we get started, we would love it if you could help other writers find our show by simply leaving a rating and review. Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it from your phone. Go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom. It really is that simple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. All right, Kathleen, I'm going to start by reading Tanya's letter.
Sounds good.
Dear Ms. Fox, A Study in Crossing Lines is a passionate and turbulent love story. When separated from her hedonistic boyfriend Sean and their decaying relationship, young actress and hesitant playwright Vivian cautiously accepts friendship and help from Sean's enigmatic frenemy, Jack. Vivian must confront Sean and his behavior and break free of the downward spiral of their degenerate love affair in order to write her debut play and experience the true nature of partnership and love. I am writing to you as your website says you are interested in romance novels that explore the creative process. Set in late 90s Melbourne, this spirited romance novel is both bold and deeply reflective. With the Gen X charm of 1994 film Reality Bites and quick, warm, and bittersweet to the tune of Mermaids by Patty Dan, A Study in Crossing Lines works as a postscript to Megan Nolan's Acts of Desperation. At 75,000 words long, it is comparable to The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. My play, Snow Cherries from France, was a 2024 Gemco Theatre finalist, performed, and later published. I've had fiction published in Westerly and other small journals, and I hold a diploma of creative writing and editing, Chisholm Institute, runner-up for the High Achievement Prize. I have also worked for Macmillan Publishers in Melbourne. I attached the first 10 pages and look forward to hearing if you would like to read the full manuscript. Okay. Kathleen, what do you think about Tanya's query letter?
Yeah. So when I first glanced at the page without even reading anything, I thought, oh, this is a little short. And I mean, I look at query letters all day long, every day. So, it just seemed to be a little bit short for me. And so when that happens, I start to think, I wonder if there's going to be enough plot details here for me. Typically, I would recommend between 350 and 375 words, and it takes up, it takes up the majority of the page, but it still leaves a good amount of white space. So then when I read the plot paragraphs, that is exactly what happened. So there is obvious tension here, but there's just not quite enough information for me to piece together what is happening in the plot. I had questions come up like, why are Vivian and Sean separated? What's causing the decay in their relationship? What is the inciting incident? Why are Sean and Jack frenemies? Why does she turn to Jack for help? What is he offering to help her with? Why can't she write plays when she's with Sean? So there's lots of questions that are coming up. And, some of those are born out of curiosity, but some of them are, like things that I really would like to see in the query letter. And I'm really wondering what's at stake for her. She has this goal. She wants to write plays, but she doesn't feel like that doesn't feel like a strong enough stake for me. And maybe it's just because I don't understand how strong it is, right, for her. What happens if she stays with Sean? What happens if she's with Jack? Like either way, what is she risking? We really need to see that in the query letter. So those kinds of key details, like it's very helpful for agents so that they could wrap their heads around what's happening and why it's happening, why it matters. And in terms of the structure, I would also recommend moving, like it's not mandatory to do this, but I'd like to see when the introductory paragraph is at the top. So that's like, this is why I'm querying you, this is my book's details, and these are the comps. And that just, having it in that order lets me kind of visualize it before, like, and get a sense of the vibe before we dive into the plot paragraphs. And it just helps set those expectations. Um, and then the comps, they were a little bit of a mystery to me as well. Like the purpose of the comps is to give that vibe, right? You want the agent to kind of get the idea and be able to envision what kind of book this is. When agents send out submissions to editors, they have to include comparable titles, and the editorial team at publishers will use those. They'll look at sales figures. So if this is a really strong comp and it did really well, that's good news because that gives you a better chance of getting an offer. So today's publishing landscape is very different from what the market was like in 1986. So for example, that's when Mermaids came out. It's vastly, vastly different how we market books these days. So comps should be recent. They should be like within the last 3 years, maybe 5 years tops. And they need to have sold well. They need to be in the same genre. So Mermaids, for example, is a coming of age novel about a 14-year-old. So I wasn't sure why that was chosen as a comp because this doesn't seem like that at all. The Rosie Project was also launched in 2013, so that's a little bit old as well. And it's also a rom-com, which I wasn't really getting that rom-com vibe from this. And then the Reality Bites, like again, that's 1994. Many people know Reality Bites, like I watched it, but it's been many, many years. So I'm like, okay, what is that about again? And so it's also pitched as a romantic comedy drama. And again, like I just wasn't picking up those vibes with just the query letter. So I would say to use 2 recent and relevant comps. And then maybe if you want to use a movie, if it's really, really important, like it really highlights something that's really important in your book, that a movie or a show can do that. Acts of Desperation feels more like a fit because it's pitched as an anti-romance and it's about addiction to love and what that can do to a person. So for me, like toxic relationship, right? That seems to fit the bill here. So that to me would be the closest in terms of a comp. But it is also bordering on being too old since it was published in 2021. You might be able to get away with that if it was, if it sold really well and it's really, really, strong. I did kind of wonder why, and this always happens anytime I see that a book does not take place in today's time, right? Today, like a modern time. What is it about the story that requires it to be taking place in a time that's not in the present day? Usually, like if there's something drastic that happens in the plot and it's, today would be able to pick up a cell phone and call 911. But in that time, if that's integral to the story and they can't just pick up a cell phone, then it makes sense to have it take place in a time that doesn't have cell phones. So yeah, it's just something to think about. I always wonder, okay, what is it about the story that is requiring it to take place in a time other than today? Yeah, and your bio paragraph, it shows agents that you're experienced in writing plays. So, that obviously comes into play here. Ooh, pun intended. It also shows that you know a little bit about the publishing industry. And I would just say to add a line that kind of shows your personality and like what you do outside of those areas. And yeah, and you don't need to say what you're including, as agents will expect that you're following what their submission guidelines are. So you don't have to worry about saying stuff like that in the query letter. I would direct it more, like use that space for the plot paragraphs. So yeah, just go a little bit beyond the surface level details and get to the heart of the story so that agents are asking questions out of curiosity and not because it seems like there's information missing.
Okay, I have follow-up questions.
Yes.
I am a little confused about the genre, but I am perfectly willing to admit that it's just me. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Tanya calls her book both a turbulent love story and a spirited romance novel. Now, I don't know if it's the word romance that's throwing me off because that instantly conjures up a very specific type of story with a specific set of genre conventions and reader expectations. For example, a happily ever after ending, right? So Maybe deleting the word romance would help clarify the pitch a bit. I mean, assuming this book is about a relationship between Vivian and Sean, which is what the pitch is more focused on, not a relationship between Vivian and Jack. Now, in saying that, from the opening pages, which I know we'll get to in detail in a minute, it didn't feel like a love story. It felt like a book about an abusive relationship that ends in a breakup. And I'm not sure how much page time Sean and Vivian, like that relationship, will have together, because their separation seems to be the inciting incident. Unless the book is really about the love story between Vivian and Jack, in which case it could possibly be a romance, but only if both Vivian and Jack are both totally free to enter into a relationship, because that's a convention of a romance, right? Because otherwise Vivian is cheating on Sean, and romance readers, like the pure romance readers, like that's not something they're expecting to see from a romance novel. So again, I'm going back to that word romance and sort of getting caught up on that. Now, I'm also wondering about the writing of the play, because depending on the spine of the story, this could actually be a global performance business story, like Believe It or Not, or more likely a global internal genre story about a woman possibly maturing, right? And you talked about a coming of age story. Well, this could be a coming of age story for someone who's a little older, or maybe Vivian is discovering a sense of self-worth. I wouldn't know unless I read the whole book. So all of this to say that the book itself might be expertly crafted. It might be amazing. But from this pitch, I don't have a clear picture in my mind about what is going to come. Like if this was the back cover blurb and I was in a bookstore, I don't know that I would understand which story is going to follow. And this is tough for writers, because we're not salespeople, and we spend all our time and energy learning how to craft the story in the first place. And now we get to a query letter, which is a totally different skill set, and we've got to learn how to pitch the story. So, all of that to say, help me with the genre. Am I just getting tangled up here? Is it clear to you, or what?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same, because you're right. Like there are certain expectations for a romance, and I'm not picking up on that romance vibe. Like it's not like fun, and you know what I mean? Like there's an undertone, and I think I get to this in the pages as well. There's that undertone of like a toxic relationship, and that's not typically what a romance novel is, especially if it's opening like that, right? Like you're right, it could be more focused on her and Jack and how that blossoms afterward. But there's just, I don't feel like what it's being pitched as in the genre is matching what's in the query blurb or what's in the pages. So I think maybe a little bit more comp research. Like comps can really help you figure out what your book is. Like if you're not sure and you find these books that are similar to yours, they have similar themes, similar elements, look and see what they're pitched as, or what bookshelf they're sitting on, or what they're listed on under Amazon, because that can really help you determine what your genre is. It's tough. It is tough.
I also picked up on stakes from the query letter. Yeah. And also stakes from the opening pages, but again, we'll get to that in a minute. So in a story, the stakes can really be anything the writer needs them to be honest. The trick is that the reader has to be really clear about what's at stake, because that goes a long way to creating tension and holding the attention of your reader. So tension creates attention. From this query letter, I'm not clear on what's at stake for Vivian. Like if she never writes her debut, what happens? What does she stand to lose? Because it seems from this query and the opening pages that her story level object of desire is to write a play, and that's different than what the object of desire would be for a romance. So I picked up on the same thing there for you. So if Tanya can just be really clear about that, I think that's going to help her a lot.
Hmm.
I have another question about comp titles. I know you already spoken about this, but just a refinement here, because I honestly don't know what the answer is. Tanya says her book is, quote, a postscript to Megan Nolan's Acts of Desperation. So how does that work when you're using it as a comp, like saying that your book is a postscript to someone else's novel? Is that a problem? Is or not? Is that cool?
I I don't think it's a problem, but I think I would want to know more about what that entails. I'm not familiar with the title, so I can't, I'd have to go and do some research. Um, so just like when you want to mention what themes and or elements that you're comparing to in a title, you would want to do the same thing in that situation because you're using that as a comp. So if that was a particular kind of story, and then it ended, does that mean you're sort of starting like picking up where that left off, or like is it the same kind of world, like the character dynamics, like there could be any number of things that it's similar to. um so yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a problem, but you want to be more specific about what you're comparing to there.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let's get into the writing sample. And do you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, grabbing my notes here. So I was initially a little bit confused with the first page or two. On the first page specifically, I wasn't, like, in the first paragraph there, I wasn't sure if the narrator was referring to a specific person or like the character she was just playing. So it became apparent that it's the character she's playing, but I wasn't feeling grounded in that first paragraph. Um, and there were also a lot of names thrown at the reader in the first couple of pages, right? And it's like, I'm not sure who these people are, and I don't know how relevant they are to the story or to the character or to what's going on. And it just, I can piece together that they're all, actors in this performance and, people in the background. But I'm not, like, you have to be careful with putting too many names out there that we, the reader, have to remember and then try and figure out where they're fitting into the story. And in the back of my head when I'm reading and I'm seeing all these names, I'm kind of keeping them back in my head, like thinking, okay, remember this name, it's going to come up later, because if it's important enough to be on the first couple of pages, it must be important. So if that's not the case, then maybe cut down on the names, or you know what I mean? Just so that it's not super confusing in the first couple of pages. It was more clear, obviously, who Robin is and who Sean is, because we saw they got some more page time. It also, I liked that there seemed to be I mentioned this before, that undertone of like, I have to keep Sean happy at all costs. I don't want to disappoint him. So I'm already getting that feeling like, ooh, there's some trouble in that relationship, right? So if you are going for that toxic relationship vibe, that's working for me. And that continues throughout the rest of the pages as well. Vivian seems to be making excuses for Sean, downplaying his behavior, that kind of thing. So yeah, it kind of was apparent that her heart and her mind maybe know better, but yeah, toxic relationship, right? By page 4, we know what Vivian wants. We know that she wants to write plays, and that's a big goal for her. And there's an imbalance of power there too, which I like to see. So it is in her control, but I don't think she realizes that, right? Like, she's thinking, I want to write plays, I want to write plays, I'm going to enter this contest. Well, now somebody else is in charge of your success, right? And that's totally fine. That's just the way it works sometimes. And you got to give yourself those chances. But there's just that feeling of she wants this goal and it's not 100% in her power yet. I found Alice to be interesting. She seems to know things, but she's keeping quiet. So that's the feeling that I got when I read her when she was on the page. So it makes me feel curious to know more about what role she's going to play, and whether she'll be helping or hindering Vivian. And I don't know if this is true or not. I had this quick thought about, oh, I wonder if Sean's cheating on her with Alice. I don't know if that's true or not. But I'm always looking for, like, what are they doing that's really, really bad? When we meet Jack, I found him to be an interesting character, but I almost felt like it was a very quickly developed conversation, like an interesting conversation, but it was very like not the kind of conversation that you would typically have with someone when you just bump into them and meet them for the first time, right? She knows who he is. He doesn't know her. So it was interesting, though, an interesting conversation. And then we get to the last page, and Vivian finds out that Sean knew about this upcoming transfer to Oxford. And so he just expects that she'll be coming with him because that's just what you do. And she's like, what? And so, like, I could see in her head, all of her dreams are falling apart. This is not the way that she saw her life going. Like, what do you mean? This is what's going on. So it was a surprise to her, a surprise to the reader. And that's a really, really good place to end that chapter, or that 10th page. Yeah, within the span of about 10 seconds, her whole life is getting turned upside down. So now you've hooked the reader and the agent into wanting to read more pages to find out how she deals with that situation. So I thought that was really great. So I do think there's some room for improvement in the opening pages, but I definitely feel like that surprise should remain exactly where it is.
Interesting. So we've picked up on quite a few of the same things, which is really good feedback for Tanya, because it's showing that that there's not 1,000 areas to be improved, but we're picking up on the same things. So these are clearly the areas that she would work on. Okay. So the very first thing I want to say is that I think Tanya does a good job with exposition, and knowing how to handle exposition is a skill all to itself. And if you remember from the last episode, we talked about ways to introduce characters, because in that case, the protagonist wasn't named at all in the opening pages. Well, right here, right on page 1, Tanya names her protagonist in a way that is both natural and seamless, and most importantly, invisible to the reader. And that is the definition of great exposition, that it's totally invisible. The reader is getting information without consciously tracking it. They just know stuff. And if you were to stop a reader and say, well, how do you know that? They'd go, I don't know. I just kind of know it, because it just is so natural in the course of the storytelling. So what Tanya has done here, she has one of the characters, Lily, speaking to the protagonist, and Lily says, quote, "Your monologue caught a few compliments, Vivian." Ta-da! That is natural when you're talking to someone that you will use their name. So now, excellent, we know that the main character is named Vivian, and we got that information without even really realizing it. So good job. The other thing I especially like about this story is the world that the story is set in. It's all about theater and actors and playwrights, and that's not super common. It's not a super common world for a novel to be set in. So I think it's kind of fresh and exciting to me. And I think readers who like that kind of thing in reality are going to be naturally drawn to a story set in that world. So I think Tanya has a lot of fertile storytelling ground to play in. And I'm curious to see what she makes of it. Now, I do have a couple of suggestions for how she can improve her opening pages and make them a bit stronger. The first, again, is exposition. Now, I know she has the ability to execute exposition, right? I just commented on it. And I think if she uses a bit more exposition on that first page, she'll draw the reader in better. And listen, Kathleen, there's a whole conversation we could have about show, don't tell, and how that's being misunderstood by writers. But listen, that's a topic for a whole nother day, or a whole nother episode, or a whole nother course to walk writers through what it is, how to use it, and why it's so important to know how to handle exposition. But right now, I'm just going to focus on Tanya's work. And my advice here is to provide more information on page 1 to orient the reader to the where and the when and the what is actually happening here. Like you, Kathleen, I was a little lost in that opening paragraph. I read it 3 times before I moved on, and I didn't know if there were two characters, like two real characters happening there, or I didn't understand it. It wasn't until I got to the end of the first page that I realized that the main character is named Vivian, who is an actor, and that the she that is being referred to is actually the character that Vivian has been playing. And that what's happening in that opening paragraph is that Vivian is letting the character that she has been playing go. That wasn't, and when I got that and went back and read the first paragraph, I thought, okay, that's really interesting. I don't know if I would have led with that as the first paragraph because it's out of context. I would have moved it a little further into the opening so that by the time the reader got to it, they understood all that and therefore they could appreciate the storytelling craft that was happening there. And okay, it's sort of a bit of tough love happening here for everybody. The truth is that a reader is not going to work that hard to understand what's happening. I know I sound so mean when I say that. I say it in kindness and with love, because the more information that we all have, the better chance of success we all have. Readers have literally millions and millions and millions of books to choose from. And if you want to be traditionally published, then you have to consider the market. Kathleen, like, I would love to know what you think about this, but I think writers have to acknowledge that their book, while it will always be their baby and their work of art, when they want to publish, especially have a traditional publishing company publish them and take the financial risk of bringing their book to market, we have to understand that our book also becomes a commodity to be sold. And if we want to earn a living, and if the publisher wants to earn out the money that they've invested, they got to sell a lot of books. And so we have to be aware of how readers read and how they make their choice about which book to buy. And it's not because we've worked so hard on our book that they should read our book. No, they're not thinking about us at all. In fact, there's a whole lot of readers who have no idea what the name of the author was of that book that they loved. It's like a dagger to my heart. And it's been hard. It's been a hard thing to accept, but it's true. If you don't believe me, just ask your reader friends who wrote the last 5 books that they've read, and they probably won't be able to name all 5. Now, in saying this, I am not for a second suggesting that anybody, quote unquote, dumb down their story or their writing style. No. Far, far, far from it. What I am saying is that part of our job as storytellers is to help our reader enter our fictional worlds as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. And the quicker that we can ground people in this world, who is the main character, where are they, what's happening, the better, the higher chance of success our story is going to have. So by putting that information, weaving it in there with the exposition skills that I know you have, you're going to really help your book a lot. The other area that I would really love to see Tanya working on is learning how to write and to craft scenes that work. Now, that's a really big topic. I'm not going to lie. That's the kind of thing that I work one-on-one with clients on. And Kathleen, I've toyed with the idea of developing a whole course about it, because it's one of the essential skills that every writer, whether you're writing novels or memoirs, you need to know how to write a great scene. And of course, an online course is a lot more affordable than private coaching. But because I want to give Tanya some practical feedback and I want to give her something concrete to work on now when she sits down at her desk again, I want to focus on object of desire. We know that Vivian wants to write a play. Tanya, she highlighted that in her query letter. And here in the opening pages, we're told that Vivian is entering a writing contest. The prize for which is that the winner gets to direct her show and see it on the stage. Awesome. Like, so far, so good. The winner's show will be produced. That's pretty cool, right? We know this, and it all happens by page 3. So that's helping us get into the story. Now, as a reader, when I find out about this contest, I'm immediately wondering what the outcome of the contest will be. So will Vivian win or lose? Because it's got to be one of the two. I'm also wondering what the consequences of each of those outcomes are. So there's a little bit of tension that's starting to happen there, right? And that's perfect. That's what we want, because tension creates attention. When a reader feels tension, they get curious and they want to keep reading to find out what happens next. And that is where we want to be. That's the sweet spot. However, on page 8, unfortunately, the tension evaporates because we discover that there are no consequences to the outcome of the writing contest. Alice, and I picked up on Alice too, she says to Vivian, quote, "Why are you entering a contest? Lily would let you put on a show anytime." And Vivian responds, quote, "She probably would, but I like the idea of earning my spot." So, one, there's no urgency here. And two, if Vivian loses, it's no big deal, because at any time she can see one of her shows being performed on the stage, because Lily will let her do that. Likewise, if she wins, it's no big deal, because the prize is something she already has at her disposal. Vivian likes the idea of earning her spot, but there's no stakes attached to that. So if she doesn't earn her spot, what happens? Why is that so important to Vivian? Like there's nothing in these opening pages or in the query letter that draws me to that as something to be curious about, as something to want to keep reading to find out about. Anyway, so this whole idea of the object of desire and stakes and tension, these are just one aspect of a working scene. I mean, there's a lot more, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. I know I just said a whole bunch of stuff, but Kathleen, what do you think about what I was saying about being mindful of your book as a commodity?
Yeah, like when you're writing and you have this idea and it's so great and you can see it in your head and you want to get it written, and it's exciting and you have this finished draft now and you're like, it's going to be so great. And this kind of falls into the decision-making process of what kind of publishing is right for you, right? Self-published authors, you can do whatever you want. If you want to be a traditionally published author, there are certain expectations that are impressed upon you as a writer, as an author in certain genres. So with those genre expectations, you kind of, I mean, you do have to meet them, you have to know how to present them properly before like you have to fully understand those, right? Before you do something different with them. And it's not to say that you can't do something different and not go against the expectations, but like introduce maybe something else, something different about that genre. There's nothing saying that you can't do that, but if you want to establish yourself as a successful author, you kind of, there are some rules that you kind of have to follow to fit into that genre, establish yourself, and then maybe break a rule or two. I call them rules. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can play with expectations and that, but yeah, in order to fit into a genre where a traditional publisher is publishing, they're going to have certain expectations. So you do have to kind of make sure that you're within those, at least for the beginning.
Yeah, because when you're starting, nobody knows you. Like you haven't earned anybody's trust yet. So everyone is taking a chance on you. Your agent is, your publisher is, and the reader is. And by the way, all of those people are all wanting you to succeed, because everybody wants to have their socks knocked off by a fantastic story. So they're all, yes, taking a chance on you, but all also rooting for you. So it's not as combative as it kind of can sound, but at the same time, once you have delivered, 3 or 4 or 5 books, and the reader knows, I don't even need to know what this next book is about, because I know, like when Anthony Horowitz puts out a book, I don't even necessarily know what the premise is. I'm just going to buy it because he has earned my trust. I know it's going to be a good book. I'm going to enjoy the story. The details of what it's about, I'm not going to say they're not important, but it's not going to not going to make me decide whether I buy the book or not. I'm just going to get it. And so he can start to play with the rules, and he can start bending them and shifting them, because I have faith that whatever it is he's doing, I am in safe hands, and he's going to, by the time I get to the end of the book, I will be satisfied. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. That is when you get to that point, that is when you can start doing something different, surprising your readers, but in a good way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so final advice, really, for Tanya, I would say, really, my top recommendation is to study how scenes work, because in terms of telling a story that will captivate readers, there's a definite structure to a scene, and it must be on the page. We can lose our reader literally at any second on any sentence in the book. But when a story has a series of working scenes, one after the other, the chance of losing the reader drops dramatically. So the stronger your scene, the more enjoyable your story is going to be for your reader. Kathleen, what's your parting advice for Tanya?
My parting advice would be to make sure that the query letter accurately reflects the genre and what the book is going to be about. Make sure those stakes are high and clear. And then for the pages, I would rearrange the opening a little bit so it's clearer. I think we're getting a lot of good information in the opening pages, like those negative undertones regarding the relationship, a desire, shock at the end of the chapter. I really like that. So yeah, maybe weave in a little bit more setting details, and like you said, work on that, on the scene structure. I would say too that if this is a story that's taking place in the 90s, I really, really I love the 90s. Mm-hmm. I want to feel like I'm in the 90s. So maybe just add some more of those like sensory details that people who grew up in the 90s, 80s, and 90s would recognize.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this week. If you want us to look at your work, visit storynerd.ca for all of the details about how to submit. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. To get copies of the query letters and the writing samples that we feature on the show, join my inner circle at valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And to find out more about Kathleen's agent wish list or what services she offers as an editor, visit KathleenFoxAgent.com and FoxEditorial.com. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.